Hello, and welcome to the webinar, Choosing the Right DevOps Toolchain, Something Customizable or All-in-One. My name is Eric Wallace with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. I have a few administrative details to share with you, and then I'll turn things over to our esteemed speakers. First, we'd like to thank Harness for their partnership with today's event. They've been wonderful partners to Argyle, and they're committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. Thank you again to Harness. We appreciate you joining us today. We also welcome you to stay socially connected during today's event. For those of you who are active on social media, please use the hashtag ArgyleDigital and follow us at Argyle Exec Forum. Also be sure to follow Argyle on LinkedIn for special announcements. I also wanted to take a moment to touch on our content neutrality policy, which we curated based on the feedback we've received over the years from our members. We've worked closely with our speaking faculty to ensure that you receive a set of balanced and neutral viewpoints during the session today, and we appreciate our members' support of this policy. Finally, and most importantly, we want to hear from you, so please submit all questions that come up during today's event into the chat section of the interface. Following the discussion, we've set aside time for our speakers to weigh in on your questions. Now, without further delay, let's have our speakers introduce themselves and begin our discussion. Eric, over to you.
Well, thank you, Eric. So I'm Eric Minnick. I've been in the DevOps space as a developer and product manager for almost 20 years now. So I'm really excited to talk today about the trends that we're seeing in tool chains and how people are putting them together. And, Ravi has been wonderful to work with. And Ravi, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hey everybody. Thanks, Eric. Like I said, my name is Ravi Lockman. I'm a product manager here at Harness. A little bit of my background. My background's been in distributed systems. So I was building distributed systems for federal clients, commercial clients. For a long time, I've crashed production many times before. I was doing chaos engineering before it was cool to take your production services offline. And now I focus on engineering and developer efficiency here at Harness. I'm very excited to be talking to everybody today.
All right. Well, we're not the exciting part. Choosing the right tool chain and how to think about it and make trade-offs, I think, is the interesting thing to talk about today. So what we're going to do here is we're going to look a little bit about what we mean by a DevOps tool chain and some of the complications that we see in DevOps tool chains. Look at assembling them out of best-of-breed solutions, all-in-one packages, or so-called all-in-one packages, and then look at how you might be able to do something in between if you wanted to do something that wasn't at either extreme. So that's the approach today. We expect that we will, generate some questions. So please put questions in the chat. We may see them as we're talking. If not, we're going to get to them at the end of the presentation and try to be as interactive as we can. I'm really excited about this one. So without any more, let's get into that tool chain. And when we think about kind of a classical DevOps tool chain, we're really thinking about, well, how do I get new ideas, right? Whether that's we should fix this bug or we should add this new feature or we should create this new product. How do I get new ideas through development, tested and secure and validated and into the hands of our customers, running those effectively, learning things in production and driving that back to ideation and development product folks. And this can be drawn in this sort of a format. We can put a Mobius strip on it if we wanted to be good DevOps people. But when we lay out a tool chain like this, it's important to realize that we're oversimplifying, aren't we, Ravi?
Yeah, I think like taking a look at this, it seems pretty easy, right? So if you look at those 5 or 6 steps, it's pretty easy. But if we're just to hone in and just one of these particular steps, so I'll just go back real quick. If we count 1, 2, 3, there's 5 disparate steps. But if we just zoom in, even to the second level or the first or second level click there, let's say testing, of course we test, we build confidence incrementally, and we kind of take the rake over the coals and like make sure that our this features match expectations. But there's a lot of steps that you have to run, right? So if we take a look at, hey, I want to go and deploy an application, deploy a service. Well, cool. There's the actual physical deployment that goes on. But what about the multiple tiers of the application? Like say if you had a database or you had some sort of machine learning workload, right, that you had to go and deploy. Also, how to start from the bottom up, right? Like since we're harping on testing, it's like, well, there's always like n number of testing methodologies. Like, what's popular today is security. So how do I go about doing some sort of dynamic scan or static scan? How do I go about even what's popular today is software supply chain, right? So making sure I have SALSA or SBOM compliance. And each one of these particular steps is like just added complexity into your pipeline. Like you have to add a +1 additional tool. There might be best of breed or very granular or coarse tools that you use. I keep adding these on. And same thing, right? Like now, as if we take a look at what's been the difference between if you're deploying something, let's say today in 2024 versus something, let's say in 2014, is having the infrastructure like near time or real time being provisioned for you. So back when I started my engineering career, we were deploying to environments that were already there, right? So like the VMs were already spun up. They had names like US New York 1 VM, US New York 2 VM. Now it's cluster A, B, and C, and they're kind of provisioned in real time, like as the pipeline's executing, just for like A, efficiency, and B, like cost management, right? And so you don't want to have anything running what you don't need. But all of these particular things are steps, right? We can't we can't predict the future in number of steps. Like if we would have looked at this 10 years ago, there would be half the number of steps. Today, there's this. If we look at it 10 years in the future, if we can predict the future, buy a lottery ticket, as my father would say. But I would almost assume that the number of steps here would double, right? And then we would have to be talking about how do we go about adding this into a DevOps or a platform engineering pipeline for us to deliver our applications.
Yeah, and it struck me as you were talking, Ravi, that what you're going to do, what steps you have, is going to change a lot, right? If today the most important thing is cost control, then absolutely you're going to have ephemeral environments, right? You're going to spin up the environment, run your tests, and take it back down. And if tomorrow the most important thing is rapid feedback to developers, someone might say, well, we use these environments a lot, and it takes 5 minutes to spin them up. Right? And that would be, I think, pretty positive if you get it at 5 minutes.
5's good. Yeah, 5's
great. But maybe that's too long, right, for the initiative that we have next year. And so we say, okay, we're going to have some static environments for the test we run a lot. We'll do ephemeral for other ones, right? So the needs that you have are going to change, right? I think that's pretty common. And we've got that here on the slide at the bottom. You mentioned things like SALSA and building SBOMs, right? No one was worried about that, 5 years ago? Yeah. Things change. So there's a lot of moving pieces. What you need for different apps might be a little bit different. And things are changing out from under us. And I think we're going to find this tension between these specialists and generalists as you look at your tool chain, right? There are dedicated tools, right, for changing relational database schema, right, and how that plugs into your pipeline. Like that's a tool chain. You could also write some scripts and run it in the most generic CI or CD tooling that you can find. That might also work for you, and it might not be as good, but it might be where you start. And so in some applications, in some organizations, it's going to be appropriate to plug in a specialist, and others it's not. And the needs of your application, the importance of your application are going to change over time. So that makes this sort of pipeline generation really tricky. Lots of things, your needs change, and specialist or non-specialist is a tricky trade-off. So how do we go about stitching all these different tools together? Right? I think that's the big question. And the way that we absolutely did this 10 years ago is we picked the tool that we liked best in every category and we stitched them together, right? And we find that there are lots of categories, right, as we were talking about earlier. And so there are lots of tools, right? How do I collect the knowledge across the organization, right? We see Confluence, we see SharePoint. I don't know, Ravi, have you ever seen in a wiki that be also the instructions for like how I do a deployment?
They get very long. I remember one of my first jobs at university. I was focused on the federal space, and our deployment. I remember the number of pages in Microsoft Word. Like my IBM laptop would like just like crash. It was like 158 pages in a docx file. I was like, wow, like I didn't Word can have over 100 pages. I never saw that in school, right? And I was like, this is huge. Kind of also like a good thing to kind of think about here. Like not only there are like a lot of tools, each one of these tools you can specialize in. Like this represents different expertises. Like there's no Renaissance person who has all these skills now. That's like kind of modern DevOps, like platform engineer, DevOps engineer, they need to have this wide gamut of tools. But being a realist here, like your particular pipeline is where all the expertises come together. So the decisions, like the reason why you have a pipeline is like for automating these decisions. Instead of having it in a 158 page Word document, you can kind of trim that down into 20 pages because a lot of the decisions are in the pipeline. But I'm probably stealing some of Eric's thunder here, but yes, like that's, not only their tool differences, there are expertise differences in each one of these tools.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point as we're thinking about building a pipeline out of specialists, right? Not only are we trying to address the the focused problems that we have in the red, right? That could be a huge problem for somebody. But when we say, oh, I want the best tool for this particular thing, right? Do I need a specialist for that on my team? And then how many specialists do I need, right? And so what we often see, is we're saying, well, best of breed often isn't the best approach, is it's not economical to take the best product or the most capable product, might be the way of putting it, in every category and put a team around it and roll it out and then go through the trouble of stitching it together with all of the other tools, right? Because I want to know things like, I don't know, what features have I deployed to production, right? Or what tests did I run against what I'm shipping to production? And to do that, I need some level of integration between whatever's doing the deployment and what's coming out of source control, so I know what's changing, and then how that maps into my tests or my features or what have you. Right? There's this flow of data moving around.
And one other like good point to bring up here, I know like I might be jumping around the presentation a little bit. It's like there's also like the benefit of convention that you would have here, and so I'll click into like the release portion here, like instead of having like when expertise kind of comes together, there's things that just should happen by convention, right? Like kind of it's expected. For example, if you were to deploy something and it would fail, like you would expect to roll it back, right? That's convention, right? Like, hey, fail, immediately roll it back. Or, if you're going for glory, try to roll forward. There's times that makes sense, but like 90% of the time, like you would say, you know what, if something just failed, go back. And that is by convention, right? And like it's hard, like when you're stitching together all of these, like convention means something a little bit different to everybody. And like each one of these verticals can have different conventions. And how do you make like that's the Renaissance problem? Like how do you understand what convention's appropriate and what's not? And yeah, that's usually best of breed often isn't like the correct conventions across all of these.
Yeah, well, there's the convention, and I like rollback as a great example. That's a perfect integration scenario too, right? I need whatever's doing the deployment to be integrated with my observability stack so that I know, did it go sideways? If it did, let's trigger a rollback of some sort. And that can be done in a lot of different ways. You could have your deployment engine notify your one true APM tool, right? I did a change. And then if the observability tool detects a problem in a period of time, it could send a API call back to your deployment engine do the rollback. And if enough data was exchanged, you can glue that together. We've done this with the deployment tool, just watching data coming in from the observability tools and saying, well, between these couple of observability tools, I infer that there's trouble. And so I will roll myself back. That's fine. There's going to be an integration somewhere in here. And I think you then get in this place where what I've seen, and I'm really curious how you've seen this, Ravi, is you end up with an organization that has picked, here are a couple of areas that are really important to us, and we're going to invest heavily in those areas with very best-of-breed tools. And for everything else, we are going to take the most default open source option that we can find, because we can hire people for that. And we'll put the open source in where we don't really need to be specialized. We'll invest in other more expensive commercial tools where we do. And then we'll have a team of people glue it together. Is that what you see out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody's culpable of doing that, right? Like I'll give you like a page out of the Site Reliability Engineering Handbook in a second, how this kind of, usually like as you know, like as companies, like you kind of focus on what like moves the needle. And like, hey, if you know, our main goal here is lessening response time because like, you know, I'm a hotel brand or I'm an e-commerce site and like people, you know, like because of this thing, you know, they'll abandon in a second if like they're not getting the experience. So you would put all the firepower maybe on the monitoring. But then you're like, oh, you know what? We know like when there's a problem, we need to kind of sway our infrastructure. But what about kind of like the innovation, right? Like in site reliability engineering, this problem is called a thundering herd problem, that like one part gets overrunneth and you don't really like understand why it's getting overrun. Like, oh, like if you just kind of flip this, like the system relation, like the system analogy into like a business analogy, like we overinvested in one area, we kind of underinvested in one area. Now we need to like scale really quickly. You know, we're in a little bit of trouble here because we're not able to innovate fast enough. We're our dial of innovation to operations like went super far to operations. Now, like, how do we free up the pipeline to innovate on, right? Or we have too many business controls, and with those stitchings together, you might take a tool out, add a tool, abandon a tool. I mean, I'm definitely guilty of that, right? Like in my career, and so yeah, definitely see that play out.
Yeah, and I think one more thing on this topic before we move on, because I did just glance at our attendees and I see a lot of people from, say, regulated organizations. There's more than a couple of banks represented in our attendees today. And so the governance is really important. So if I want to know that when I deployed to production, that thing was actually tested and security scanned and all of the other gates that we have in place as part of our written policy, right, which might exist in a Word doc that's 200 pages long or series of wiki articles or however you want to do that. I again have this data integration problem as well as a technology integration problem of making sure that when someone goes and hits the button to say go to production, all of those things have happened. And maybe I punt on that and I say send all your evidence that it happened to ServiceNow, and part of my going to production is validating that the ServiceNow ticket is in the appropriate state. That can work, but you're not doing that if you want to do really modern DevOps and you want to deploy to production multiple times a week or multiple times a day, right? You're not creating a big approval process around that. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges around governance when you have a very heterogeneous tool chain like this. So let's leave it there. I think we've beat up on best of breed as much as I like parts of the approach. So what I think we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years in the industry is this move towards, well, that best of breed, integrating the data, integrating the tools, having specialists for everything, that's really expensive and doesn't always work. So maybe we just need the one thing, right? I need a DevOps platform. It's going to do all of my things. Cool.
Or a DevOps appliance. And that was my idea. So
yeah,
it turns blue when DevOps has been achieved. So
It's a big, and like, look, we're vendors in the DevOps space. And I did a survey across the DevOps space, like what's on the front page of everyone's website. It looks kind of the same because this idea of an all-in-one platform is really attractive right now as a bit of a backlash to best of breed. So what we're going to say is, well, I got the one thing that does everything. And what I really mean by that is I have a wide collection of tools that cover many, many of the best of breed categories, right? Ideally, it's all of them, but all is hard. And I have integrated all of those tools together really well for you, right? So you don't have to do all the data integration work. You don't have to do the tool integration work, the flow of change work. I'm going to minimize that as much as possible by having one of everything and stitching it all together. So that, I think, seems like a pretty reasonable approach. But there's this challenge, Robbie, that like everything is a lot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, definitely, like you tend to like overbuy. Like I'll make a joke. Like one of those is ours on there actually. So I'm not gonna tell you which one is ours, but yeah, one of those things is ours, right? So like totally feel for the buyer. Like I recently had to purchase a platform for my team, and it was like just inundated with similar messaging. Like which one of these will do the cool? What's the next best thing? And kind of what I noticed. Was this problem here. And so I'll tell you a little bit of 1 minute story time. We found, like my family here, we cut the cord a while ago, but the Super Bowl was coming up, right? So like webinar 101, like don't mention a date, it'll date the webinar. But a month ago, the Super Bowl was coming up, and I was like, do I get Pluto? Do I get I need to find somewhere that streams like CBS? I definitely want to see the Super Bowl. And I looked at a couple streaming providers, and I was like, oh, okay, like this, this one here seems to be a good deal here. We can, get local channels. But then, like for myself, I went to an ACC, like an Atlantic Coast Conference University. So I was like, oh, I really want ACC network, right? Like, and basically the ACC network was not in the cheaper package. It was like in the ultimate package on here. I was like, oh, now I have to pay like $40, or we have to pay $40 more a month. But we're getting a whole bunch of other stuff that we didn't need, right? So like the one feature that I wanted in streaming case was the ACC network, so I can watch my alma mater, kind of play on Saturdays or Thursdays when they play. And I had to end up getting a bunch of channels that we probably like actually never watch. And that's kind of like what's the funkiness with tier picking. I mean, I'll put it back on Eric to do kind of the dirty secret. As a product manager, we go through packaging decisions. Like Eric, you're a product manager for a while in your career. Like, how did you determine packaging? What went to what tier and what didn't went to what tier?
You want everyone to be on Ultimate.
Yeah,
like that's what you want to do, right? That's what the product manager is there to do, right? And so they are going to find something really great that's going to appeal to anyone who might pay for Ultimate, and put it there, right? So it might be for, I don't know, and I am not a cable company guy, but if I was to guess, like who's got a lot of disposable income to throw at TV, right? It's going to be those, like Robbie looks like he's 30, right? So it's going to be those like 25 to 40-year-old guys. What do they want? Live sports. Okay, so we're going to put the coolest live sports stuff in the Ultimate package.
they did that.
And then like I'm going to try to figure out like, okay, who else is going to want to watch a lot of TV? I don't know, like the stereotypical stay-at-home mom, and I'm going to get myself in trouble here, but I'm looking at these packages and I see Lifetime in the Ultimate, and I'm trying to reverse engineer that decision. And maybe it's to get this to appeal to a stay-at-home mom who's, the kids have just started to go off to school. She's got more time than she did a couple of years ago. And so Lifetime channel, like maybe that's the thinking there. And I appreciate that I'm now canceled. But like, that's how someone's probably thinking about that. And we're going to see the same things out of the people running DevOps tools, right? You're going to say, like, the easiest thing to do in the past is single sign-on is only an ultimate because enterprises care about that, right? And frankly, how you're going to do this is you're going to say the developer who's doing the first scouting mission doesn't care about single sign-on. And so they're going to look at the cheap package and go, that might work for us. But then as you get to a buying process, someone often compliance will get involved and they'll say, no, we have to have single sign-on. And so we'll move up to the ultimate package. And that's the play that every tool vendor's doing when they put this in front of you, right? They want you in the ultimate package.
Absolutely.
The other thing that I think is going on here is when we talk about DevOps tools, remember our specialists, right? Our database migration tool, right? Our MLOps tool, our the really fancy test data management, because for our application, our production database is like 50 gigs of super proprietary personal information. And we need to test against like a 1 gig data set, and all that data needs to be scrubbed. So we need really good test data management. And that's my app, right? Is the all-in-one tool going to have world-class, amazing test data management? Probably not, right? So we're then in this place where it's like, I had to get the ultimate package because I wanted to watch like CNN and NBC and also the Lifetime channel, because I'm a sucker for it. And on top of my $120 a month for the ultimate cable package, I also want Netflix, right? And these other 2 streaming channels, my specialists. And so this again gets to a big experience. And now I have to deal with a situation where it's not just cable again, right? I somehow have 120 channels of cable and I'm still watching Netflix.
And 4 bills. Yeah. You have
something else.
4 different vendors to choose from, and oh, why is my Amex points not, or like my streaming credit not getting applied to this one? Oh, I maxed it out. That's why I said.
And we're all off on the place, right? So we end up back in a Frankenstein of sorts very often. So I think when we're looking at this all-in-one package, right, I could say I'm going to get the basic package, and I'm not going to get the ACC, and I'm not going to get the Lifetime channel. But there's going to be 50 channels of stuff to watch, and I'm going to just do that. I will live with what's in the box. And that's a viable way of consuming a DevOps tool chain as well. I'm going to find an all-in-one provider. I'm going to use whatever the heck they want. And maybe I'm not going to have good test data management. I'll deal with it somehow, right? I'll build it myself or something, right? And the build around it is what we see happen a lot. Because what happens is, you're like, the DevOps leadership team said, this is too complicated. All of these tools, we can get an all-in-one and it's going to be great. And yeah, we need the ultimate package. But it's going to be the one tool to rule them all. And we put that in place. And it takes about 5 minutes for someone to raise their hand to say, that wasn't enough for us. We need this specialist. And now I can't sell that to the CTO and CIO. I just stuck out my neck for the all-in-one package. Ultimate. It had everything. All right. There were 10 columns and a bunch of things in each of the columns. All right. So now I build a test data management tool myself because I've got engineers. Is it as good or as cost effective as getting one of those? No. But it's socially acceptable. It's politically acceptable in my organization. So you kind of get this building around whatever you have in the all-in-one. So that's normal. And then you also have this shimming the best of breed. We recognize that we need test data management or great feature flags or something like that. And so even though the all-in-one tool has not built out really good APIs for integrating, because it doesn't want you to integrate, it wants to be all-in-one. Right? It doesn't want you going from cable to Netflix. It wants to keep you in cable. I will build my own shims from that one tool to the other. And so I say I'm going to do best of breed and have an okay of I'll have an all-in-one, which has one of everything, whether it's good or not. And where I need to use something better, I will go buy something better and I'll do that integration work again. But at least I'm doing that occasionally, not for everything all the time, right? So it's the same problem as we had in best of breed, but not as frequent, not as dramatic, not as
that plus one is actually, it takes a lot of time. Like I don't want to downplay like we have to, if you have to add another, like, no, we can't predict the future, but like, let's say like SBOM or like software bill of material or like SALSA compliance like came out today, you know, it like going back and adding that, it's not a little level of effort, right? It's not insignificant. There we go. That was the word I'm looking for. It's not insignificant amount of effort. It can be fairly big, and like those decisioning that comes out of like let's say your like SBOM conformance stuff that you do can impact the entire pipeline. You might have to wire like multiple API endpoints. You might have to wire like, oh, we have to go and, you know, the results of this have to go into a ServiceNow ticket. So now we have to do all these other like consolidation work to make that. And it's always going to be another tool. Like you know, there's always a plus one. Like every year, like something else comes out, or it's very reactionary. The reason why there's an SBOM approach is because they had supply chain poisoning, the type of attacks that went on right now. And so like, because of that, there's a reaction to it, right? And then we have to be reactive. So that's an unfortunate nature of the work. A lot of these things are reactionary. You know, a lot of things, you can't be strategic about it. And this is where like the planning becomes ad hoc. And this is why, you know, it's like, oh, now we have three choices: settle, build, or shim every given time.
Yeah, it's going to happen. And so I think as guidance for someone trying to think about these sorts of things, what direction do I want to go? I would just say recognize that it is unlikely that any platform, ours included, is going to cover all of your needs from here until the forever, right? And that you're going to need something around it. And so understanding this extensibility points, what does it take to shim? What if I did want to build around? What if? And so honestly, consider like, where am I likely to do this? Where am I not? Both now and in the foreseeable future. Makes a lot of sense in your decision-making process. You don't want to find yourself in a walled garden where to shim out is really expensive, right? You want that to be something that, you know, your tool chain vendor has thought about, how do we do this, and has made it as easy as possible. All right. So what we're seeing, and frankly, our approach is more of a modular platform approach. And this seems to be where things might be going in the industry. And so, you know, tagline for this approach would be platform with humility, right? We're going to have some of those platform ideas, right? If you're using all of the capabilities from the platform, it should work together beautifully, right? It should be pre-integrated. It should be smooth. It should be like really clean, right? You should get those benefits that you were expecting from an all-in-one if you use it as an all-in-one, but it should be built with the assumption that you won't use it. It won't be the only thing that you ever use, at least for some of your teams, right? And so it should be well situated to integrate with other stuff, right? To say like, yeah, it's possible that you're going to have a need that I did not anticipate, or at least I didn't build yet. So it'll jump off. So yeah, Ravi, I guess, you know, we talk about this idea of the expectation of like, most users of this kind of platform won't use all of the pieces. I mean, is that what we would expect for most of these tools that we're talking about?
I mean, I would hope so. Like you pay for what you want, or because like it's kind of like, I've been on both sides of the table. I've been like, you know, like working for currently like work for like full like just I work for a software vendor. I work with Eric and I are peers, right? And then like I've been on the buying side and like as an engineering leader, and like what you don't want to happen is that you don't want to have licensing driver architecture. Like that's like you don't want that to be a limitation. And that's like I'm actually talking about that later. I'll talk about it now since keep it a little more organic, right? Like in my house of cards analogy, that it kind of the one thing you as an engineering leader, like you want to make sure that your architecture is not limited based on licensing, right? Oh, because we can only do n number of bills, like we're just gonna cap people, like, hey, that's not helpful for anybody, right? Like, or how you recognize value is not in line, because at some point I'm actually doing these calculations for something that we're selling. It's like how we go about deriving value, like does the tool set is a sunk cost, like is it in line with how we're selling our end product or our bill of like our sellable good, right? Or it's called COD, cost of goods delivered. Yeah, like I'm doing this finance stuff now for like probably the first time, like cost of goods delivered. Yeah, so it's not like my sister, she's in finance, right? And so yeah, like doing this calculation and like having a modular platform is easy to separate it out, and then we can at an executive level, like we can make sure our cost of goods delivered is more predictable, right? Than saying, oh well, we had to buy the ultimate package, even though I go and watch Georgia Tech when I went to the university and go play, right? And now we have Lifetime and all their channels that perhaps might not get any usage, and I'm overpaying for the ACC network at that point. So yes, I went on a little bit of a tangent there, but people
and I think that it gets to some of the tension, right? Like I bought the ultimate package and I'm watching 6 cable channels total out of the 150 that I got, and I'm paying for Netflix, right? And that's what we see in DevOps land, right? I bought the ultimate package of the all-in-one. It's got a whole bunch of stuff in it I never use, and I'm still shimming out to go use some best-of-breed tool. And so to say, you know what, if you're not going to use this whole chunk of functionality, like it shouldn't be in the UI, right? Let's simplify the user experience. Let's not pay for it. Let's simplify in those ways. And if you do use everything, great. Then it'll all be pre-integrated. So this approach seems to say that all-in-one plus shimming is going to be so normal, we should build around it as the assumption, right? And that's what we're seeing more and more kind of be where the industry is starting to move towards, where you want to make sure that you don't have 10 different deployment tools running across your organization. You don't want to have 10 different test data management tools running across your organization. But if sometimes your CI/CD platform and your test data management platform are from different vendors, that should be okay, right? That should work. It's about simplifying your tool chains, making sure they all work together well, not necessarily simplifying vendor management, although if you can do that, that's nice.
Talking about Netflix, one of my favorite shows, House of Cards. I was like, oh yeah, this is why we have our Netflix subscription. I was like, well, why don't we watch on it? Yeah, so House of Cards is one of my favorite shows on Netflix. But kind of like what you're looking to build again, it's like at some point there will be the weakest link in the chain, right? And like I hate to be cliche, like you're only as strong as your weakest link. Well, in system design, maybe not. You can avoid that weak link for a long time. But you end up with a house of cards architecture that you kind of set and forget, and certain things scale, but then the thundering herd comes and you find that card that just fell down, on the right there. It's kind of similar to like when you're tying all these tool chains together. Like it manifests itself in like odd ways for us, right? Here at Harness, like at least for my team, for stuff that we're prototyping and whatnot, it's one of our observability vendors builds us, like we integrate with 2 or 3 observability vendors to make sure that we're monitoring and we're adjusting appropriately to like spikes in demand. But like this vendor builds us for data usage. This vendor builds us for number of services. And so we actually run out of subscriptions sometimes. And as the managers, like, oh, we have this huge Confluence page, and it's like this is when these licenses expire. And this is like how they're consumed, and then like we had to get procurement involved. It's ongoing. Actually, I literally got pinged about that. Like, I put my phone down for Slack because we're having one of those problems right now. Like literally right now during this webinar, right? And so this house of card problem is like, oh, what if this vendor turns us off, or like we don't? We have to be able to take them out of rotation. It's going to take engineering time. We're going to have to like make kind of justification. We'll have to like learn how to We had to back up what we did. We have to like, hopefully it'll restore like when we like sign back up. And this is like, hey, try to, I mean, this might be a pipe dream, but like try to avoid this house of card architecture. Like when you're looking at like building things, and like that's what modular platforms will help you do. Like it's like a Lego, plug and play. Block comes back, it remembers, like building the Lego Porsche, like put the wheel on, the wheel works, take it off, as the kids would do. Porsche wouldn't go anywhere, put it back on. Lego Porsche, Techniques Porsche will go where it needs to go. So that's kind of where I was headed out with House of Cards. Like it's a very real problem for us, actually. Even as a sophisticated vendor, there's still, we have to figure out other people.
Yeah, and then I think the other kind of thing to think about is making sure you can scale whatever you're doing. It is one thing to be able to run a proof of concept or a proof of value, however you talk about it, and show that some stack of tools will work, right? Will do the things, right? To get you from idea out to production and get that feedback back. Great. What is it going to take to drive that across the organization, right? Will these tools scale in terms of actually running at some size, right? That's probably something you're more likely to look for a reference on than prove out by trying to load test some vendor's tool. But something I think you can look at and put your hands on is what's it going to take to say, we have not just one application with a Java mid-tier and a React front end, but we've got 10, 100, 1,000 of these. Yeah, we saw some big banks joining here. I know you have like thousands and tens of thousands of applications, right? So if we are going to standardize on something, what does it look like to roll this out across thousands of applications, right? How cookie cutter can the configuration be? Can I copy and paste this stuff? If I need to then change what I've copied and pasted, what does it take to roll out that change to 1,000 applications? Am I making that change one time or 1,000 times? Right. One time or 1,000? Because I don't believe I'm going to do 1,000 things in a row correctly. Right. So digging in deep on those scalability concerns, on how do I report across my whole domain, not just across an application, those are really, really critical considerations. Whether you're doing this in a best of breed way, whether you're doing this all in one, whether you're looking for something in between, you got to hit that scalability side, particularly scalability and configuration.
And with that, like also like one good thing to like, this is like literally the problem we're running into like literally now as this is going on, is a lot of part of like you can't forget, like as engineers, or like we have to build, right? There's a lot of times you focus on the end state, but to get to this point, there's like most of our costs are non-prod costs, right? Like we're iterating constantly to deliver the feature, or deliver like the innovation that we need. And so like a lot of the scaling work for us actually happens in non-prod. It's kind of the most elastic part of our spend, or elastic part of like where we push the platform, or elastic part of like license burn down for us. It's like something I can't forecast very easily is the innovation iteration time, and which as a manager or a leader do not want to stifle. Like this will be detrimental to the business of like, oh, hey, by the way, Mr. or Mrs. Engineer, like do that one less time today. It's like, huh? Like, if you watch me write software, you might think I'm stupid, but software is trial and error. Like you try, what's the result? Try, and then you get it right, or you get to a point that it's right enough. And so that's scale comes at all parts of your SDLC. Just as a friendly reminder, I'm sure people here are very well looking at the attendee list. Like I'm sure they definitely know that, but just to reiterate that.
Yeah. May have been an unnecessary rant, but it's something I'm no, it's not an unnecessary rant, because I have seen it done badly so many times across so many organizations. If I can help one person not get trapped, I will have spent this hour really, really well. And I think with that, I want to know how Ravi and I can help the folks here. And so as we move from here, I think we'd like to go to Q&A. So throw any questions you have out in that chat. And Eric, do you want to ask the questions? Is that right?
Sure. Thank you both for that wonderful discussion. And just as a reminder, you can still enter questions, and we're going to review some of the questions that have come in from the audience. So the first the first one of which is, shouldn't this be choosing the right DevSecOps toolchain?
As opposed to DevOps toolchain, that would probably be more buzzword compliant for today's environment. Security is absolutely critical to a modern DevOps toolchain. Calling it DevSecOps makes a world of sense. One of my favorite slides I've ever seen was kind of talking about this, and it's like a 10-year-old slide from Patrick Dubois, who coined the term DevOps originally. And he's like, if we do it right, it's called something like the biz dev product QA sec infra ops something tool chain, and it's a word the length of your arm. So yes, but also it's all the same stuff done well. I don't know, Ravi, you think we messed it up?
No, I think I like that buzzword compliant, because it's more like I would give an intrinsic answer, like what's the difference between like DevOps and DevSecOps? Like the sec part, security part, like security is everybody's concern. It's just like now, like it's like a specialization. Like if you look at this is like a 30-second answer, like the whole point of having like a pipeline is like to bring in expertise, or like how does expertise get disseminated across organization. For example, here at Harness, we have hundreds of engineers, but we have like 2 AppSec engineers, right? Like who are dedicated, and that's typical to any organization. And so like getting that expertise into a pipeline is the security part. So like, both DevOps, DevSecOps preach, hey, how do you help people learn? Automation is one way to help people learn, because the decisions are pre-baked, right? In some sort of decision tree. And so that's it. But yeah, no harm changing the name.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're looking at the CI/CD, the delivery pipeline, that system. What we are trying to do is there's new code that's been written by a developer somewhere, and we are trying to determine, should this be in production? And if it should be in production, we want to release it. An important part of deciding whether it should be released, whether it's better than what we have, is it secure? But does it work? Does it perform? If we're manually testing user experience, do we like it? Right? Maybe as part of a canary release with feature flags, we're saying, do our users like it more? And all of these things get into this general question of, is it better or not? And is it releasable? And security is a critical part of that. All right, that was way more of an answer than we needed on that one.
But good question. Yeah, like we're happy, happy to talk. We're excited to talk to people. So yeah, feel free to contact us after too if anyone has any questions.
Great, thank you. So the next question is, we are struggling to improve our DevOps systems. We've outgrown a lot of the systems and governance that worked when the company was smaller. Do you have any advice for us?
Yeah.
I have some advice, but this is like not good
advice.
Go first. It's like, how much can you get away with, right? This is like the absolute worst advice you can give someone. At some point, both sides of the balloon animal, like you squeeze a balloon, like you'll have to you only have so much consumable bandwidth, right? You squeeze somewhere, balloon will get bigger and get smaller. It's change is slow, right? Like one of my mentors in the industry actually lives out in Colorado. He came from a special education background, and then he went into DevOps. And he always reminds me, like, hey, you measure, when you're dealing with a child who has needs, like you measure their progress over years. You don't say, every semester, why is this child not doing any better? Like that's not good for the child. It's not good for the parent. It's not good for anybody. Like DevOps is like it's it's a culture. It's there's more than just a tool. Like because you have Jenkins and you have DevOps, or my DevOps appliance turns blue somehow when you achieve DevOps. Like change takes time, right? And like it, probably one of those things didn't scale properly. Your capacity, like the people, process, technology. Like technology is the easiest one to solve. Like it's not performant enough. You can scale it. Like add another node. Look for more form system. It's the people and process part is always like the hardest thing there. Like time will you know how much wiggle room you have. You work there, right? Or you have or you're really attuned with that. And if you like kind of bury a little more wiggle room there, you can kind of push forward a little bit. That's a super intrinsic answer, but like it's like how much can you get away with every time you move the needle a little bit? And incremental change will take time. Like don't be like upset like a quarter in like you didn't have the results. Like both Eric and I are in product. We have year planned for the year, right? And so like sometimes quarters don't make sense for us, and we would optimize the wrong way versus like we need to do what's right for the company so we have more time.
Yeah, I think there are some times for step changes to approaches, right? Like incremental improvement, usually the right answer, right? And there are times for step changes, right? We are going to basically tear out our tool chain and replace it. And it could be that you've exceeded your capacity in scale, right? And now you're like, okay, I got to go find DevOps toolchain that scales, right? That's our mission. And you're going to take a hard look at every tool you have right now and say yes or no, right? Do I like how this scales or not? And then I'm going to look for a new foundation, probably with CI/CD as the core that I know will scale really well. What do I have right now that'll plug into that? And what do I have that won't? And it might be time for a step change. The other time I see step changes happen is when you're going faster and faster and faster and faster. Usually around the time where you're accelerating from releasing every 2 weeks to releasing, trying to get to like multiple times a week. Somewhere in there, all of your tools that you had before were about, I've got kind of biggish releases and I need to orchestrate across a big pile of stuff. And then after there, it's, I've got really small things and I need to get them adjudicated quickly. And so the features that were awesome in your old tools are no longer appropriate for your new tools or for your new reality. And you need a different feature set. And you're going to make another step change where you might do a wide ranging rip out. So those, I think scale would be one place and speed would be the other that might trigger a step change. But if you can do incremental, go incremental, that's more likely to be something you can swallow. Eric, where should we go next?
So let's skip around in the questions a little bit. The next question is, we struggle with DevOps in a heterogeneous environment with different technologies, mainframe to x86 and everything in between. Any advice on pulling together these different groups? It's complicated by some apps are tier 0 and some are tier 4.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. I can take a stab at that one first, Eric. You want me to? I think with that, like all those technologies are so different, right? Like mainframe, LPAR this, LPAR that, like big iron, and then you have, the standard x86 distributed architecture, like that is difficult, right? Not going to sugarcoat it. You have a wide set of technology there, but there's things that kind of bind certain things together, right? Abstraction is your friend. Having like a common like reporting wiki or in the modern terms, there's this internal developer portal that's been kind of gaining traction. Even if your systems can't enact change, your systems can report the same. And so there's a common place for people to get information. Information dissemination is kind of important. If we're talking about delivery pipelines, your CI/CD or CD pipeline specifically, they might work or might not work together just because of the underlying technology that has to call. If it's, I know in mainframe there's been a lot of push to have Linux on mainframe, and if you have Linux, you can put Docker on the mainframe, right, or Java on the mainframe. And so, but if it's straight up hey, this is COBOL with the LPAR wiki, just having a standardized set, it's the Spotify tribe and guild model that what really you're looking to optimize. I'll take a platform engineering approach. Is that if you had someone in mainframe team and they needed to go to a distributed, like Go or Java team, like what's the burn cost for them, right? Like, is it even possible for them to have a similar set of experiences? It actually might be impossible, but it's first start with this information, like have a custom wiki that lists everything out. So it's like one place for people to go.
Yeah.
Sharing is the first thing. And then if there's like compatible tooling that kind of matches everything, like if it's Linux on the mainframe, Docker, Java, everybody got that. Not a problem. But I'm not sure if you had another answer.
Yeah, it gets to that specialist problem, right? Like we said, well, database DevOps is a little different than going to Kubernetes, is different than a VM, might be a little different than mainframe. In mainframe definitely is going to have unique challenges because you've got different system architectures, right? If you're not on Linux, if you're not Linux on Z, basically.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're talking COBOL, we're worried about LPARS and data loads and all these kinds of jobs. There are specialized tools for that, right? That is a really natural place to shim, right? To say, okay, I am going to do a developer portal, something like Backstage, right? An internal developer portal that's going to give me a view of everything. I'm going to build my mainline CI/CD around maybe distributed apps and cloud native, right? Maybe that's a good fit that I can hit 80% of what I got. I'm gonna get a specialist for Z, and then I'm going to try to do some common reporting over the top, some common visibility over the top, those sorts of things. And then I'm going to make sure I've got a good API gateway between the mainframe and the rest of my applications so my developers can consume those mainframe capabilities just like any other web service, right? And I can test them just like any other web service, right? So I can get some commonality in my testing tools because I just tested an API layer for a lot of stuff. So I think there's some games you can play around trying to make things look the same with API layers and then know where you're going to specialize. And that's totally fine. And then there's the tiering, and some of that gets to levels of governance and compliance and things like that. The fewer sets of rules you can have, the better. One might be too few, but trying to say, look, here's the number of tests and security scans and things for a lower importance thing and a higher importance thing. And now I'm just going to drive that across the organization. You could do that in 5 levels. It's just more work. An arguable value.
Great, thank you. Let's take one more question. And that is, what's the biggest mistake you've seen companies make in trying to adopt an all-in-one platform approach, and how do they get past it?
I can take a first stab at that. I know we're getting close in time. For me, it's like it's something I fell into the pit of doing before. Maybe that's like a little bit of implicit bias there, but it's like it's optimizing your engineering activities based on licensing, right? So if you get like a kind of all-in-one doesn't mean all you can eat. It's not like a cable provider. Like, hey, I can watch as much ACC network as I want and as little, like lifetime as I want. I'll still pay the same price. Not with this type of tooling. No, your billing might be different dimensions, right? And so it's just like, again, because you had to get a certain capability, the billing direction or like will drive kind of architectural and engineering behavior. So that's like the biggest thing I've seen. I don't know, Eric, if you've seen more or less or something else.
Yeah, and you're hitting things like, well, we got all in one and it looked cheap and great. But now I'm going to choose not to actually do continuous integration and build every time we commit because our build minutes are expensive or something like that, right? That's sort of letting the license terms dictate your behavior in a way that it got worse. It's really distressing. And then I think the other one is I want to move to this platform and we're not going to need any other tools ever. And it was sold to management that way. And now you're in a corner where you need a powerful specialist somewhere and you're not allowed to get it. And so now you're like trying to figure out how to coax some random CI/CD tool that was built for VMs or cloud native into doing mainframe deployments, and you're real sad. So don't overpromise that they can actually do everything just because that's what it said on the front page of their website.
Great. Thank you, Ravi and Eric, for that insightful session. This concludes today's webinar, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today for this excellent virtual event, and thank you again to our partner, Harness. This webinar will be available on demand for the following week. If you'd like to learn more about Argyle, please join us for a short video. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.